Shalom, friends. Welcome. This is the Jewish Road podcast. We want to bring you a mini-series that we're going to call Borderlines. We are in between seasons and getting ready to launch the next season of the Jewish Road podcast. But these recordings were taken from a trip that my dad and I took last summer, the summer of 2025. And Israel is still at war. We were actually walking along many of the borders. And so these 3 episodes that you're going to hear over the next 3 weeks take you along the border with Syria, along the border with Gaza, and along the Palestinian territories that some would call the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. And along the way, we are going to talk to people who live on these borders, who tell us what is life like along the borders and how do they go on living, surviving, and even thriving in some of these places. So this is 3 episodes, 3 borders, and all one story, the unbroken storyline of Israel. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. What you're about to listen to is us in the Golan Heights with a guy named Ilan Schulman. He's a kibbutznik, grew up on a kibbutz in Israel, former IDF paratrooper, current intelligence reservist, and he's finishing a PhD on how Syria's cities have changed since the civil war started in 2011. Now, he's spent his entire career trying to understand what's happening on the other side of that border, and today he's walking us through it. Not from a headline, but from the ground, looking straight into Syria. At the Jewish Road, we believe that you cannot understand the land or the book from a distance. And so we sat down with Ilan for almost 2 hours, going through the land, going behind some of the military lines in his Jeep and sitting down and talking about what matters most, what's actually driving some of the chaos in Syria at the time and how Israel is responding, and why what happens on this ridge affects a lot more than this region. Let's get into it.
I kind of limit the period here starting from 2011 and after December 8th. Because in the university, you cannot do a research if you don't have historical perspective and to write things on the current regime of Sirah. But we're going to talk about the guy, and that's something that I do in reserves, and try to understand him and his people better, and the different threats that Israel is facing in the past half a year, but the threats that we had before. And I think that the conclusion is going to be, that's kind of a spoiler. The conclusion is going to be that this is, we experience now a history in making. Yeah. Something that's quite amazing. In terms of things that last time that it happened similar to this was in 15 and 14, on August 23rd, when there was a battle taking place between the Sultan Salim I and the Shah Ismail I. And then the Turks managed to defeat the Shiite Persian Safavid Empire, something that paved the road to conquer 2 years after Aleppo and in Syria from the Mamluks, ex-Egyptian slaves that managed to conquer the whole area, and the beginning in 1516 of the Ottoman Empire that controlling the whole area. Right. So seems like that. Maybe this is going to be the history that repeat on itself. Right. We'll see, and hopefully not, of course. I don't want to get Ottoman citizenship. Right. Because then Jews that lived in Israel, part of them were citizens of the Ottoman Empire, and part of them came here, means the migration was forbidden. So many of them came with the citizenship of the countries that they came from, which allowed to be here in Israel and had, it's called capitulations, means different rights to buy lands here when the reforms in the Ottoman Empire created from the mid of the 19th century. Reforms of it's called the Tanzimat. So, we see here, something that, we'll see. Turkey already starting to talk about colonies and territories and make Turkey great again.
In this area. And they want to come in here.
It includes this area, yeah. We'll talk about it and how Syria turned to be a significant part, maybe even the epicenter of the strategy.
So Schulman just laid out the big picture. That's what we're watching in Syria right now. It might be history repeating itself, the same way the Ottomans swept through this exact region 500 years ago. But to understand why that matters today, you have to understand what's actually driving the people fighting for this land right now. And Ilan says that the only way to really get it is through their own text, the Quran. Here's how that plays out, starting with the name Hamas gave to October 7th itself.
You know, not such a long time ago, we talked about the Iranians building a ring of fire around Israel. And we experienced the ring of fire during this war. That's October 7th.
Hezbollah.
Getting attack from Hezbollah and Hamas. You know, when Hamas invaded into Israel, Yahya Sinwar, the commander, the military commander, he called it Tufan al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa, the mosque.
Flood.
And Tufan means a flood. The flood of Al-Aqsa. So, and then we need to look, those guys are very religious. And almost everything they do and all the decisions they make connect with the fact that they are very religious. They read the Quran, they read the Hadith, they read the Sirah. Sirah, that's the way that Muhammad lived his life, made decisions, got dressed, and even brushed his teeth. For example, ISIS used to brush their teeth with a branch of a mulberry. Why? Because that was the way of Muhammad, brushing his teeth.
Yeah.
That's the way that those guys think.
Yeah.
And once a Syrian told me, if you want to understand the Khawarijis, the jihadists, so just know the Quran. Memorize the Quran. Learn every chapter. First of all, I realized that they not necessarily know all the chapters.
Yeah.
And the Quran very good. And sometimes they get kind of notebooks or manifests, which is kind of Islam for dummies. But still, you know, when they do something, so they will explain it through the Quran. I will give you a few examples during this tour, how it works. In the case of Tufan, the flood, that's the flood that we know from the Bible. The flood of Noah and the ark.
Right.
So in the Quran, that chapter, that surah, called Surah Al-Kabut, the chapter of the spider, which talks also about, I don't have the Quran in this vehicle, I have in the other, that talks about the flood and Allah that will make all the infidels to drown. And you realize that it's very similar to the chapter in the Bible. But then they without naming the infidels, but it's very clear who the infidels are. Today, you will see, by the way, it's interesting. I recently read a textbook of the new regime. And I don't know from where they got it, but one of the farmers here managed to get it. But gradually they get the same education system. But meanwhile, I saw that they used other books, and which means that the regime do it gradually. But in Damascus, brought it from there. You see that if there are different chapters and sentences in the Quran that talk about the infidels, about the heretics, so the new regime will add Jews and Christians. And in the same time, they talk about normalization with Israel. They shake the hand of Trump, but they want the sanctions to be removed. But if you want to see and understand the way that they run the country, I believe that the best way to do it is through the education system. Because they want to educate now a new generation for a different future, to have a different future than the one that they had during the previous regime. Previous regime barely taught Islam, and Syria became quite secular. Now everything is relative, and some will say there's no secularity in the Islam, but most of the Syrians are less religious than the Qataris, than the Saudis, the UAE, the Jordanians, part of the Egyptians.
So that's the theology behind the war. Now, here's how Israel has actually tried to fight it. Not just with tanks, but with intelligence. We're standing at a memorial at this point for one of the most legendary spies in Israeli history, a man named Eli Cohen, who infiltrated the highest levels of the Syrian government back in the 1960s. And Ilan uses his story to explain something Israel is still relearning today. How easy it is to misjudge who your enemy actually is and where their money is actually going.
Eli Cohen.
But
Something just happened with that.
There were
letters
2,500 documents that, the Mossad claimed that were brought by a brilliant operation from Syria. In the website of the Syrian government, they published that, they found those documents in one of the archives of the previous regime and decided to deliver them to Israel as a gesture. So I don't know what is true and what is not, but definitely the Syrian regime making an effort to try and convince Israel that they are okay, that we have no reason to be concerned. I think it's going to be very hard now to convince Israel after October 7th.
Right.
Before that, it was very easy to capture in the wishful thinking. And we believed it also with Hamas. For a while we believed, here again, not political perspective, but military one. Up to 2019, we believe that if there's money that gets from Qatar through Israel to Hamas, it will use for civilian purposes. This was a Syrian army base for pre-67. So it will use for education. It will use for rebuilding Gaza, for normal purposes. For 2019, we realized that the money was used for terrorism. I think that also the decision makers knew it. Why they decided to proceed with the same conception. I'm assuming that people are people and they want to live. And they were aware that they're actually paying protection here. A protection fee, the same as Bedouins here take from different businesses for not burning them. So also here, it's a very Saudi way to do things, not very fitted to Israel. Saudi Arabia will pay money in order to buy protection. Saudi Arabia will sign a normalization agreement with the worst enemy they have, Iran, just in order to make sure that maybe by having an agreement, the Iranians won't attack them or won't order part of their proxies, for example, the Houthis in Yemen, to attack them. And that's something that was worth it. And signing on that agreement was practically paying money for Iran. So same here. I think that there was an understanding in Israel, but in the same way, you can say Hezbollah. Hezbollah was much, much bigger than Hamas. That looked as a gang compared. And Hezbollah, we knew that they were armed by 200,000 missiles and rockets.
Right.
Or 150,000, doesn't matter. And something that many of the NATO countries can be jealous in. And why we decided not to fight against it? Mostly because of the fact that there was a lot of tourism here in the north. And people live their lives. And many communities were very close to the Lebanese border. It was convenient that there were barely attacks coming from Hezbollah. So yeah, it was pretty clear that they're building their strength. But, when it's going to happen, we'll deal with that. We're going to cross the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of very normal for us, for Westerns. You know, we want to buy peace. We're seeking for peace. We want to raise our children. For the Arabs, there are many Arabs that also want to do it and say, Bidna Aish, we just want to live. But in the same time, there are many radicals that want something different. Like these are the people that we're dealing with on the Shiite side, on the Sunni side.
No, but since October 7th, it's a necessity to be more proactive. No?
So Israel learned that we definitely have to be much more proactive after October 7th. Means it's not about analyzing the intelligence regarding to the intentions of your enemy, whether he wants to attack you or not, whether he's preparing for the attack or not. No,
that's a good
analyze the enemy as an enemy. Means look how much weapons the enemy has, the command, how many soldiers, means how the organization is built, not the intentions. Who knows whether those guys, what do I care if they have 200,000 missiles and rockets, whether they plan to attack Israel or not? Of course they plan. They haven't bought all those missiles in order to let them get rust.
And they're not there for defense against Israel, right?
Yeah.
It's offense.
Yeah. So for example, if we're talking here about Jolani, Jolani had a bounty on his head for $10 million. Up to recent, till he started to wear a suit with a tie.
Is that by Assad? Or?
By America.
Oh, America.
By America. We'll talk after about his bio, so it's going to get more clear.
This is the one who just took over in Syria.
Yeah, the president of Syria had a bounty on his head up to
10 million, 25 million.
Practically 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So what? Then he was a jihadist and today is something different.
No.
Here we're trying to analyze the different attentions.
You went to the road to Damascus.
We need to look at the history. We need to understand what are the things that the guy done, how he built his militia, the massacres over there. And then by doing that, understand this is the enemy that we have. So now, whether the enemy going to attack us today or tomorrow, doesn't matter. It means that we have to be prepared. And if it means that we have to be more proactive, we'll do it. And therefore, we're now still fighting in Gaza. Therefore, we still have 5 positions in Lebanon. And we have a buffer in Syria. That's the reason. That's the lesson that Israel made from October 7th. To say that that's the way to protect ourselves, time will tell.
So Ilan just made the case that Israel has learned the hard way to stop asking, does the enemy want to attack us? And start asking, what does the enemy have? And that shift, being proactive instead of reactive, didn't come from nowhere. It came from a war fought on this exact ground. One that Israel almost lost because it wasn't ready. And 50 years later, Ilan brings us right back to that day.
The last war that we had with Syria was the Yom Kippur War. We mentioned that, 1973. 1,400 Syrian tanks breached the border. Against them stood 177 Israeli. So 5 divisions versus 2 brigades. In terms of artillery, 900 artillery batteries versus 44 on the Israeli side.
44.
And by the way, along the Suez Canal with Egypt, because they coordinated the attack with the Syrians, it was much worse. 1,200 Egyptian tanks crossed on rafts the Suez Canal. On the Israeli side, in the first hour, we had 3 tanks. That's it. 80,000 Egyptian soldiers. On the Israeli side, occupying 14 positions of the Israeli defense line, the Bar-Lev line, we had 250 soldiers. So obviously, we lost on both areas in the beginning, land and soldiers. There were many Israeli soldiers that have been killed then. Here in the area of the Golan, 500 Israeli soldiers got killed in the first day of the war. And it included one of the brigade commanders and his deputy and almost all the company commanders.
Wow.
So
I remember that war. I remember the 67 war. But in 73, the backs were against the wall, like you're explaining here completely. What did Nixon do to help Israel at that point? How was everything overcome?
So he supported Israel mostly by sending weapons. It wasn't in the beginning. I think that Kissinger and Nixon misunderstood the situation. They didn't have the intelligence picture to understand. And Kissinger thought that the war maybe ended by an attack of the enemies, and Israel that before that wanted to open by a preemptive attack, because it wasn't a complete surprise. It means we knew that something is going on. We just thought that we can have less forces in order to stop it than we actually needed. But there was no option for Israel after 67 to use that tool of the preemptive attack. Because of the land that was gained by Israel during the 6-Day War.
Yeah.
Means most of the Western world came and said, now you managed to create strategic deep. You have buffers. So you can use Sinai in order to protect the people of Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And you can use the Golan Heights in order to protect the people of Haifa. But, in between the border with Syria to the people of Haifa, there are many other communities. So in Israel, there's never a strategic deep or a buffer. The land is populated. Also in the Golan, there were people. They were just evacuated before the war began, in contrast to October 7th. As a result of the fact that it wasn't a surprise. And Israel knew that they were going to have another war right after 67. And the collective memory in Israel is different, yeah? Israelis will come and say, 67, after the war, that was the hubris sin. The sin of pride. We started to underestimate our enemies. We realized they won't attack us. They were defeated in such a way that they won't try to do it again.
Yeah.
That's what many Israelis believed or remember that that's what they believed in. But I can tell you that the military system knew different. The military system started to experience a war of attrition right after the 6-Day War. We had constant attacks coming from Lebanon, from Syria, Palestinians, and Jordan, and Egypt. So all around. We had constant attacks that eventually the Arabs decided to stop. Means it was then Nasser, just a month before he passed away, on August 1970 in Egypt. Said enough is enough, that's not the way. In Jordan, those were mostly Palestinians that started to gather more and more confidence, and they even tried to assassinate Hussein, the king, and he expelled them as a result of particularly having a massacre in the refugee Palestinian camps on the Black September of 1970. And that's when many of the Palestinians, the PLO as an organization with the leadership, moved to Lebanon. And will make us problems there, but they also made problems for the Lebanese. That's something that will bring to a civil war in Lebanon. Starting from 1976, some will say that it's still continuing, but officially it ended in 89.
That's the cost of being caught off guard. Fast forward 50 years, and Israel wasn't going to make that mistake again. Right after October 7th, Israeli forces crossed the border into Syrian villages with a mission that sounds almost impossible: convince armed villagers to hand over their weapons without firing a shot. What Ilan found out in those villages ends up explaining more about Syria than almost anything else he told us. So it looks like all of the supply lines that could continue to harm Israel are methodically, very systematically being cut off, whether that is weapons, whether that is drugs. Seems like Israel is taking advantage right now of this time, not only fighting this war down there in Gaza, but they're also, how do we actually prevent something more catastrophic from the north and from Iran, from Syria?
Preventing, it's a big word. We can try to do things. First of all, we have to understand what's going on the other side, understand the complexity. It's not black and white. You cannot come in and say, okay, the president of Syria is bad, the Druze are good, The Kurds are good. The Shiites are bad. And the Bedouins are good. Unfortunately, it's not the way. We have a tendency to see things black and white because sometimes we don't have enough intelligence. Usually we have a problem with the intelligence management. And third, we are Westerns. We have a different rationale. For us, things are much more simple. It feels like that our lives are complicated. Live in Syria and see what complexity is. And we have to adopt a different rationale, different way of thinking in order to understand them better and then understand what is the threat, what is the nature of the threat, which kind of threats we have, and how to deal with them, which is the main thing. So all eventually supposed to lead that. For example, when we got there into Syria, we had a mission, which was confiscating weapons from the villages. We're talking about December 7 last year. Israeli army crossed the border, several locations, not many forces. And the idea means there was intelligence, which was pretty good, that there won't be much of resistance. The Syrian army fled, concerned from the rebels. We'll talk after how the rebels took over, and we're going to kind of complete the picture, but we realize that there are different threats in Syria, which we have not necessarily to eliminate, but to disengage in between those threats and the communities here on the Israeli side, kind of post-trauma of October 7. And then the idea was to get to the villages and to confiscate weapons without using any force, without using military capabilities. You can hear the drones. Today we have many of them. So now there were interrogators of the UN intelligence. And the idea was then to speak there with the head of the village, every sheikh in the village, in the different villages, in 20 different villages that we decided on, that consider as a threat and were close to Israel and to the border. And to convince the guy to lay down their weapons, and to give those to us. So sounds like impossible, but never say never.
My nephew was part of it.
And the idea was, first of all, to convince the guy that we are probably the better from all the options, or less bad than the other option that he has. Because what were the other options? First of all, the Iranians. They were still around. And the Iranians used to knock on the doors of the people. Usually they don't make so much noise.
I don't even see it.
Oh, they're small.
Still have the trauma a little bit from the Iraqi drone that came here. This is probably a friendly one.
Probably.
Yeah, I like the problem.
I'll tell you after why we have the trauma in the kibbutz even. So anyway, we had, where were we? The idea was now to get there to the village and to explain them. One option is the Shiite option. Shiite option, the Iranian option, knocked on your doors and in one hand offered masari, money, and on the other hand had a knife. And you had to choose whether to take the money and join their militias or to bring your daughters and then they will show you the way that they use the knives. That was a daily dilemma on the other side. The other option is to get Jawlani, to get Al-Qaeda into the villages. Those people experienced Al-Qaeda. Jawlani was here controlling the lands that you see here below.
Yeah.
So he made a deal then with the Syrian regime and left. But that was on July 2018. Till then, for 4 years, Jawlani was here. So we knew him when he was actually, Jawlani means Golan, when he was actually in the Golan.
Wow.
So, and here, Israel is probably a better option. We're Westerns, we're humanitarian, we won't kill your children, we won't make you to convert, we just want to have quiet, that's it. We're protecting our communities. And most of them know it, And also the fact that Israel once in 2012 up to 2018 gave them humanitarian aid and send painkillers and medicines and diapers and baby food, food supplies, generator, fuel, prosthetics, glasses, ambulances sometimes. Of course, it helped. Part of the people remember that. It wasn't such a long time ago. So we managed to get their cooperation. Part of them. You know, you have to spend the whole day with that sheikh in order to build that trust, kind of. Trust is also, it's a big word. To get that understanding. And then once you get almost to the evening, it started to get dark, you know, December or so. So it was kind of afternoon, it started to get dark. So that's when the first sheikh got to his men. The village had 200 people, 40 of them were armed, told them, get all your weapons out of the truck. And he used the word rifles. So, you know, you can assume, the idea was to assume that, yeah, those were rifles. That's what they have in the village. Makes sense. Then in the beginning, they brought Kalashnikovs. And then after they came with machine guns, 50 Kals, part of them were American made that sent to Syria supporting the rebels in 2011. And those were the rebels and the weapons got to the villages. And then they brought an anti-tank system that's called Cornet. So kind of a primitive version of a Cornet, having been effective to a range of about 2.5 miles. And then after they brought a different Cornet, laser guided, with a range of 8 miles. And then after, it looked very familiar system, also anti-tank, but electro-optic. Very familiar because it was an Israeli. They call it Helmes. We call it here Gil. And that was an Israeli-made system that became operational in the late 80s and used Israel during the Second Lebanon War in 2006. And then Hezbollah managed to put their hands on one of those missiles that didn't explode, or I don't know. Sent it to Iran. Iran re-engineered the system and provided that to Hezbollah and to the groups here, which part of them were Iranian proxies.
Wow.
And then you see the electro-optic and anti-aircraft systems, about 20 of them we found in the whole area, not many, but these are systems, shoulder systems that can intercept a helicopter easily. So, you find weapons that, farmers not supposed to have. Right. Part of the weapons they knew how to use, part of them not. But eventually we got their cooperation. And then you come and say, okay, the next thing now that I want you, the sheikh, is to help me with the next village. But then most of them said to the interrogators, La zalama mish minna, means, no sir, they are not one of ours. And, you ask what's the meaning, not one of yours. You are Syrian, they're Syrians. You are Sunni, they are Sunnis. What's the difference? They will say different, El-Ahel, means a different tribe, different clan. So, and he said, I won't marry my daughter with his son, because they cannot be trusted. And then you ask, what, do you have no intertribal marriages here? Said most of Syria is like that. 198 different tribes, 12 of them control the country, the land. That's it. Each live for himself. This is Syria. And then I realized that there's no Syria. There's no entity that we can call Syria of people that feel one nationality as one group. Common interests. No, each care about his territory, about his tribe, about his village. That's the way it is. And therefore, it's not a surprise that they're having a civil war that started on March 2011. And then when the war began and there were people protesting against the government, so the president sent his army for shooting them. But Syria then was a country of 24 million people. 74% were Sunnis. The rest minorities, of course, Shiites, Circassian Druze, Ismailis, Turkmenis, Alawites, Christians. Means the commanders of the army were Alawites, the same as the president. And Alawites celebrate Christmas, Easter, a few of the Muslims' holidays, drink wine in the ritual ceremonies. They're not exactly Muslims. And now they gave the orders to a Muslim to kill another Muslim, to a Sunni to kill another Sunni. Many of them came and said, no thanks. Means for them, the Alawites, they say in here, Akfar min al-Yahud wa Nasr. Means there are more heretics than the Jews and the pagans. And they are the one that ordering now me to kill my brother? So they defected and formed different militias. Part of them were freedom fighters, part of them protected the village, part of them were jihadists. But then, when Assad couldn't trust his own army, he decided to use his Shiite friends, Iran. And that's when we started to see much of Iranian involvement, 2012 into 2013. The Iranians were smart. They brought few hundreds from the Revolutionary Guard Corps. They brought few hundreds from the army. But they mostly used proxies. And they brought them mostly from Iraq. Only in Iraq, you have 67 different militias that consider as a different part of the Iraqi army. They kind of almost have no connection with the Iraqi army. They control the economy of Iraq, but not the army. And they're completely independent militarily, and 46 of them loyal to the Iranians. So the Iranians sent the 46 to Syria. They Saib al-Haq, Lewazul al-Fikar, Leofad al-Abbas, Imam al-Hassan, Hezbollah al-Bid, Hezbollah al-Qatab, Hezbollah al-Harakat al-Nujab, Hajj al-Sha'abiyah, sent to Syria. Okay, and probably a few more that I forgot. And we're talking here about many soldiers. And then they brought the Liwa al-Fatamayun. That's the brigade of the Fatamayun. They're Afghanis. The Liwa al-Zanabiyun. They're Pakistanis. Hezbollah from Lebanon. In total, you had about 100,000 militants that serve Iran. And fighting there, they were fighting mostly, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whoever considered as a real threat on the Syrian regime. With the help of Russia that got directly involved since September 2015, mostly bombing from the air. So, for Israel in the beginning, we said, okay, these are Sunnis fighting Shiites and Shiites fighting Sunnis, means finally, it's an advantage to be a Jew in the Middle East. Let's use it. That's not our war. But gradually we realized those Shiite militias brought with them long-range missiles and anti-aircraft systems. So we understood that this is Iran that's seizing here an opportunity. The fact that 700,000 people got killed in Syria, 6.6 million displaced and 6 million refugees, and 90% live on the poverty line, same percentage of no electricity, 50% with no food security, same percentage have no access to fresh water, means catastrophe, okay? Yeah. And that catastrophe was the platform the Iranians established their presence on. And we saw it not only in the military level, which we tried to fight against, and there were many Israeli attacks, 40 a year in average, since it started on 2013. But I would say that in the same time, we started to see these kind of mosques. See there with the green dome? That was once a Sunni mosque. But then we realized the Sunni mosque turned into something different. You don't need it to be, there was no need to be an intelligence officer. It was just enough to understand Arabic. And you could hear them saying, calling to the prayer and saying, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu la ilaha illallah. I'm testifying that there's no God besides Allah. Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. I'm testifying that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And then a sentence that I never heard coming from Syria. Ashhadu anna Ali wali Allah. I'm testifying that Ali was loyal to Allah. He was the founder of the Shia and the fourth replacer of Muhammad. If I'm saying the first four were the most important in the Islam, if I'm saying that only the fourth one was loyal to God, I'm practically saying that the other three before weren't. Which means that was a Shiite provocation against the Sunnah. But the Shia was only 3% of Syria. So from where they got the confidence to provoke Sunnis like that? The only answer could be Iran. And we realized that here we have the Iranians right on the border. They're taking over Syria bottom up, starting from the street, building a mosque, building a Husseini religious center, and then after that, knocking on the doors of the people, providing them schools, education, teach them Farsi, clinics, hospitals, control real estates, control natural resources.
They got their foot in there.
Providing them the basic needs, most of the services. You go now in Lebanon, if you're not loyal to Hezbollah, you cannot go to the ATM. Because the ATM, the bank system of most of Lebanon, is the Cardinal Hassan system, Hezbollah Iranian system. If you're not part of it, you have no money. That's just one example. Energy. Most of the energy in Lebanon and gradually got into Syria, was operated by a company called Amana. And Amana, it's an Iranian energy company. So you won't get fuel without being loyal to the Iranians. That's the way that things worked. And you couldn't blame them for changing loyalties. But that was the thing that Israel was focusing on.
Yeah.
We completely ignored the fact that there were people here fighting the Iranians for a while.
So that's one thing I'm going to walk away with from this conversation. Syria isn't one country pulling in one direction. It's 200 tribes. It's a dozen sects, and it's a region that's been fought over since before the Ottomans, before Rome, going all the way back to the Bible. And that's exactly why we do what we do at the Jewish Road, because you can't understand the news, the headlines, the nations, or even the New Testament without understanding the roots this all grows out of. So if this episode has opened your eyes even a little, there's a lot more where it's come from. You can listen to all of our episodes on the Jewish Road podcast. You can go to our website at thejewishroad.com, and you can find blog articles and other resources there. And we want to invite you, if you want to actually come and set your feet on this ground, in this land of Israel, we have tours going all the time. Our next one is showing up October of 2026, and it's not too late. You can join us there. We already have a crew that is signed up and ready to go. And if you missed that one, there's more to come. Thanks for listening. This is the Jewish Road Podcast.